Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Why do nations have a judiciary? Now you might say that is to ensure that every citizen gets treated fairly according to the law. But in that case, empires also had judiciaries. They also needed judiciaries. Caliph Harun al-Rashid had a judiciary. Emperor Vikramaditya had a judiciary. Ashoka the Great. Everyone else from Akbar to whoever else who got called great, the great, had a judiciary, right? Or anybody who called something the lion-hearted or whatever had a judiciary. Now, judiciary can bring you fairness according to the law of the day. That could be true of empires, that could be true of Genghis Khan, that could be true of a colonial power also, East India Company as well. To expect that you need a judiciary only so that every citizen gets treated fairly according to the law as the law exists or as the law has been sort of ordained upon you, that is to set your expectations very low in a very minimalistic way. In a modern civilized democracy, a judiciary does much more than enforce the rule of law. A judiciary essentially is the protector of the citizens' liberty. Citizens' liberty, also it is the job of the judiciary to make sure that the laws that are promulgated or that are passed by the legislature or enforced by the executive are fair in terms of the constitution. Our constitution has now been defined to have some basic characters. The fundamental rights in our constitution generally are part of that basic character. So nobody can mess with it, and Mrs. Gandhi tried to mess with it in 1975, between 75 and 77. We know what happened. After that, many other correctives were put in, and now it's impossible to amend any of those articles. So that's where we stand. And we remember those Keshwanand Bharti and Jabalpur STM judgments. Let me not go into those. Now, we are blessed with a great constitution. Our great judiciary in mid-70s, in troubled mid-70s, made sure that the basic structure of the constitution cannot be messed with anymore. The judiciary that exists now, especially the Supreme Court, it is there to make sure this constitution is followed. So today, with its judgment on the Pegasus case, a judge of the Supreme Court of India now, led by the Chief Justice himself, N.V. Ramana, and also including Justice Suryakant and Justice Hema Kohli, the three-judge bench, has given a marvelous order today on what is known as the Pegasus case. Now, Pegasus case, as you know, this is a software or something like a software or some mechanism that an Israeli company, NSO, had produced that many countries had bought, and intelligence agencies of many countries had bought, including, it seems, India's. And revelations had come out showing that many Indians, journalists, activists, doctors, government officials, even people who are now ministers, they had been spied upon using Pegasus. Now, many appeals had been filed, writ petitions had been filed in the Supreme Court, basically asking who authorized it, who was snooped at, why, what was the security, and also complaining that, look, my privacy, which you, Supreme Court of India, have now defined as a fundamental right, my privacy has been violated. So, Supreme Court has today given an order. It's a marvelous order, and you know what? The best thing is it's a brief, succinct order. It's 46 pages, double spaced, large type with a lot of space, which is easy to read and doesn't have much clutter. So in the morning when I heard that they've given such a landmark judgment, I thought, oh, 576 pages or something. Now, can I read it in a day? But it's only 46 pages. So in fact, if you have the time, and I'd suggest find the time and read it. It's good reading, it's stirring reading, also you will learn a lot from it. It's very well written. So I will share the entire link with you. Some parts of it will run on the screen as I talk as well. Now, what have the judges said? In a sense, the judges have said that, look, under Article 32 of the Constitution, Article 32 is every citizen has the right to seek a remedy if she thinks her fundamental rights are being violated. That under Article 32, citizen comes to the Supreme Court asks the government some questions, government says, look, national security, this, that, I can't tell you anything. They say that if you just blindly hide behind that large excuse that this is national security, I can't tell you anything. That violates the citizens' rights under Article 32. The Supreme Court also says that privacy also now is a fundamental right. In fact, the Supreme Court also quotes from one of its own recent judgments making privacy a fundamental right, that is the Puttaswamy judgment. There also Supreme Court said that that's a fundamental right. So when all this is violated, then a citizen has the right to come to the court. Government can't get a free pass. That's the expression that the court has used. The government can't get a free pass in the name of national security. And the court also goes on to say, and similarly, national security cannot be a bugbear for us that we then fail to look into these areas. So in this case, we've given the government ample opportunity to come up with a detailed affidavit. First of all, saying whether they've done this or not. Second, if they've done this, who's done this? Third, who authorized it? Who takes responsibility? Who decided who's to be spied upon, etc., etc. The government has done nothing of the sort. At the same time, the judges note that there are no denials from the government to say that no, we never did it. No such thing happened. Those denials are also not there. So now the judges have set up a committee of 3 members headed by Justice Ravindran, who is a former respected judge of the Supreme Court of India. He's been on many committees after that. In fact, one of his books was recently released, which the serving Chief Justice released just the other day. He'll be heading this committee. This has experts. This will also be supported by a team of technical experts. And the next date is 8 weeks, so I don't know if there's a deadline for the committee or not, but this committee now has to recommend the way ahead, remedies, also find out exactly what has happened. And the court has said in its order that it's important to set up this committee because the writ jurisdiction of the court, we can ask the government questions under the writ jurisdictions. But we cannot go and do as much fact finding as something like this might require, particularly in this case, and I am adding this, particularly in this case when the government is just hiding behind the excuse of national security and is not willing to share anything with the court. Now, what have the judges done? They start this marvelous judgment with a quote from 1984 by George Orwell. And that quote is a famous one. I'm sure most of you have read it at some point. This is, if you want to keep a secret, you must also hide it from yourself. So in this case, government seems to be saying that this is such a secret, national security, that I can't even let the Supreme Court of India know. Now, all right, national security, if you were tracking a terrorist, right, then you say, I'm tracking terrorists. Or if you were tracking a foreign spy, I'm tracking a foreign spy. Even if it's maybe a foreign diplomat, maybe somebody like that, maybe somebody who's an evader, but to say, how would you justify if you've been tracking journalists, activists, your own civil servants, your own politicians, opposition leaders? That is Watergate raised to the power 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can choose, right? That is where the government has lost the argument in the court of law. Now, Supreme Court has given us a lot of wisdom and they've quoted a lot of authoritative people on the question of privacy, limitations of government power, national security, the balance between national security and privacy. So one of these quotes I really like, and it will run on the screen as I talk, and you should read it in the judgment in full. One of them is from Daniel Solove, who's the John Marshall Harlan Research Professor of Law at George Washington University Law School in Washington. Now, he says the debate between privacy and security has been framed incorrectly, with the trade-off between these values understood as all or nothing proposition. So it's not all or nothing, that you can either have national security or have privacy. Then he goes on to say, but protecting privacy need not be fatal to security measures. It merely demands oversight and regulation. Those two things are missing in this case with the Pegasus case. We can't progress in the debate between privacy and security because the debate itself is flawed. That is what Professor Solove said, and the Supreme Court judges quote. Then Professor Solove goes on to say, privacy can often be protected without undue compromise over security or with a fair compromise if needed. But before that, you need disclosure. You need to say what is it that you are doing, what is it that you need to do, because courts also make those compromises and courts are understanding of the need for national security. That's also what the judgment says. So once again, to use the concluding line of the passage from Solov used by the judges, he says, we can reach a better balance between privacy and security. We can't afford to fail because there is too much at stake to fail, right? And I agree with that. I don't think there can be much argument with that. But to say that because national security is involved, I'll do what I want, anybody working for me will do what I want, nobody will know who's doing what to who, that is what the courts have rejected. Then the courts go back to the 1985 Indian Express case. That is where the Supreme Court had set the definitions of press freedom in India very strongly, and that judgment has been the guiding light for press freedom in India now for more than 4 decades. Para 39 of the judgment says, it is undeniable that surveillance and the knowledge that one is under threat of being spied on can affect the way an individual exercises his or her rights. See, all of us worry about our phones now. All of us worry about our devices now. Our email. We go to WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp is encrypted now. WhatsApp is broken. I've said it 4 times, right? WhatsApp is broken. That encryption in WhatsApp means nothing. Then you say, all right, I'll use Telegram. I don't know how good is that now. So Signal. But if Pegasus is used, all this doesn't matter, because Pegasus plants a Mickey in your phone or your device. So effectively, the outsider who owns that franchise of Pegasus controls your device. That outsider can also switch it on and off. That outsider can also plant stuff in it. So that is the kind of power the outsider gets on your life, because all our lives run now on our devices. So the judges say it is undeniable that surveillance and the knowledge that one is under threat of being spied upon can affect the way an individual exercises his or her rights. Such a scenario might result in self-censorship. So once again, अरे भाई फ़ोन पे ज़रा ध्यान से बात करो, अरे बॉस ये तुम ईमेल पे नहीं कहो, ये कोड में क्या दो, या मुझे सड़क पे मिल के क्या दो. See, everybody is now learning to be a little bit cautious. That's not good, particularly, definitely not in a liberal democracy, constitutional democracy that India is. In any case, that is not how the Constitution or the framers of the Constitution and the protectors of the Constitution envisaged India to be. That's not the kind of democracy we want it to be. Then the judges go on to say again in para 39, this is of particular concern when it relates to the freedom of the press, which is an important pillar of democracy. Such chilling effect on the freedom of speech is an assault on the vital public watchdog role of the press. And then they go on to quote also from a Supreme Court order on Anuradha Bhasin versus Union of India. Now this is very important, I tell you why. And why as a journalist I find this extremely important. Because freedom of the press in India is not guaranteed by any specific law or any specific section of the Constitution. My freedom of speech as a journalist is the same as yours. That is Article 19 of the Constitution, that I have the freedom of speech, freedom of expression subject to certain restrictions. There is no particular dispensation for the media, for journalists. Whatever is there came up as part of a social contract that came into being in India after the emergency. When people of India said that Mrs. Gandhi censored journalists, that was a cheap thing to do. We didn't like it. We will not ever let it happen again. And since then, when these questions come up, usually courts weigh in on the side of the journalists. But these freedoms are not codified, and these freedoms are not always clearly stated. So just as these judges are quoting the Indian Express judgment of 1985 to make their point, these paras will now be quoted by courts and judges in the future also to support the idea that press freedom is something that Indian democracy and Indian Constitution lays such great store by. So it's very important. And then the courts have actually sprung a surprise. It is such a pleasant surprise that when I was reading it, I said, hell, how come everybody missed it? So you will now see it on the print. My colleague Bhadra Sinha has done a story on this, because the other thing that we in media do not have is protection of our sources. There is nothing in the Indian law that tells me that your source is sacrosanct. So we say that we'll never reveal our sources are sacrosanct, and that is the essence of free journalism. But if I go to court and a judge asks me, so and so, reveal your source, right? I cannot say I have a right not to reveal my source, because the judge may insist. Of course, I might then say I will not reveal my source, and judge may send me to jail for it, right? And journalists have gone to jail for refusing to reveal their sources, particularly in the US. There have been some famous cases, but I'm not going there. But in this case, the judges in this judgment is not about journalism as such, but they've written these beautiful paras that, at least in my recollection, for the first time, give a framework for the protection of sources, and also a definition of how important anonymous sources are for journalists. Now, the judges say, para 40, an important and necessary corollary of such a right, that is right to free press, an important and necessary corollary of such a right is to ensure the protection of sources of information. Protection of journalistic sources is one of the basic conditions of the freedom of the press. How long have we been waiting to hear something like this or read something like this? But now this is there in a Supreme Court judgment, and lawyers, judges, plaintiffs, clients, challengers, they'll all be quoting it in decades to come. You remember that. Then it goes on to say, without such protection, sources may be deterred from assisting the press in informing the public on matters of public interest. Then it goes on. I'm so taken up by these paras that I'm reading them in full for you. There is no clutter there, but the clutter only lies in the fact that it's 46 pages. The headline is, judges set up a committee on Pegasus, and we will miss this fine print. Para 41. Having regard to the importance of the protection of journalistic sources for press freedom in a democratic society and the potential chilling effect that snooping techniques may have, the court's task in this present matter, where allegation of infringement of these rights of the citizens have been raised, this assumes great importance. And then the judges quote another Supreme Court order, that is Ram Jethmalani versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court has said that Government of India can't refuse to give information on something, saying for whatever reason that we will not give it, because if they did that, that will be a violation of a citizen's rights under Article 32 of the Constitution, that is seeking constitutional remedy. 32 subclause 1 actually says seeking constitutional remedy in the Supreme Court of India. So when a citizen goes to Supreme Court of India, government can't say, I'm not answering this. That is not an excuse, no matter what the reasoning given, including national security. That is the important part. This is where the court said that national security cannot be a free pass for the state, and nor can national security be a bugbear for the judiciary, so judiciary can't go there. And then they go on to quote again from a judgment by Justice H.R. Khanna in the Keshwanand Bharti case, the immortal Justice H.R. Khanna, who protected our freedoms forever and our constitution forever. And they go on to say that, look, there is politics. Everything has politics in it. Judges can't get into politics. In fact, that whole passage will be displayed on the screen, so I'm not reading it. That judges can't be driven by politics. Judges should not be influenced by who will benefit politically and who will not. But judges can't be oblivious of politics. And they have to understand the picture, and while they cannot make laws or they cannot define laws, they have to ensure that the laws are fair and they are implemented fairly. And then the judges go on to say that government has produced no fresh facts in justification that they cannot reveal any more information to the court, in which case the court can't be a mute spectator, because if the court is a mute spectator, then the court will be failing in performing its own duty. Now the details of the order you will read from our stories. The committee is set, the members of the committee is remit. So you can read the 6 aspects that the committee is supposed to look into now. This for Government of India is quite a setback, because they thought they'll be able to ride roughshod over it just by using national security. That has been completely denied and demolished in this unanimous judgment. Now, as I read the judgment, I find some other very interesting quotes there. Short judgment, by the way, but still very scholarly. So there is one that I really like very much. That's from William Pitt, that is Earl of Chatham in 18th century, late 18th century, who wrote, "The poorest man in his cottage bid defiance to all the force of the crown. It may be frail," that means the cottage, "it may be frail, its roof may be shaky, the wind may blow through it, the storm may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England can't enter. All his forces deserve not to cross the threshold of the ruined tenement." Now that is the kind of value that you put to privacy, your own right to be by yourself, and no government should have the right to violate it without any reason. That's the point that the judges are making in this judgment. They also have quotes from some other reputed names, famous names, Samuel Warren, Louis Brandeis. These are quotes from almost 100 years ago. Then also they quote from a recent book, that's by Ellen Alderman and Caroline Kennedy, Right to Privacy. That picks up the American debate on privacy, and with that they've made this judgment and the argument behind the judgment, the justification behind their order, very, very contemporary as well as rooted in tradition, Indian as well as global. That's why I would say that this is one of the most important judgments delivered by the Supreme Court of India. Please read it, because this will be quoted often in many contexts. And the best thing, again, it's only 46 pages.